The phone rang at exactly 2:47 in the afternoon. I was sitting in my old recliner, the one I'd bought 30 years ago when my wife was still alive and our son was just learning to walk. The leather was cracked now, patches of foam showing through where the armrests had worn thin. I picked up on the third ring. Dad. Just that one word, but I knew immediately something was wrong. My son's voice was cold, detached, like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed 100 times. Daniel, I said. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I'm just calling to let you know that you have 2 hours to pack and get out. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat up straight, my heart suddenly pounding against my ribs. What are you talking about? You heard me. 2 hours. Pack your things and leave. The house is mine now. Daniel, this is my house. Your mother and I bought this house 40 years ago. We raised you here. Not anymore. The deed's been transferred. Everything's in my name now. You need to leave. My hands were shaking. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. You can't just throw me out. This is insane. What about the money? What about everything your mother left? That's all taken care of. You don't need to worry about it. What do you mean it's taken care of? Daniel, I need to know what's going on. 2 hours, Dad. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone in my hand. My mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. This couldn't be real. My son wouldn't do this to me. Not Daniel, not the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd worked 60-hour weeks to put through college, the boy whose wedding I'd paid for just 3 years ago. But the coldness in his voice told me everything I needed to know. This was real. This was happening. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me. The house was quiet around me, filled with 40 years of memories. Pictures on the walls, my wife's favorite vase on the mantel. The scratch marks on the door frame where we'd measured Daniel's height every birthday. 2 hours. I walked upstairs to the bedroom I'd shared with my wife until she passed away 6 months ago. The closet still smelled like her perfume. I pulled out an old suitcase from under the bed and started throwing clothes into it. My hands moved mechanically, but my brain was still trying to catch up with reality. How had this happened? When had my son become this person? I thought about the last few months. Daniel had been distant after the funeral, but I'd assumed that was normal. Grief affected everyone differently. His wife, Jessica, had been even worse, barely speaking to me at family dinners, always making excuses to leave early. Now it all made sense. They'd been planning this. I finished packing and looked around the room one last time. 40 years of my life, reduced to a single suitcase and a duffel bag. I grabbed the framed photo of my wife from the nightstand and tucked it carefully between my clothes. Downstairs, I stood in the living room, taking it all in. The couch where Daniel had taken his first steps, the window where my wife used to sit and read in the afternoons, the kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together as a family. All of it was about to be taken from me. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Daniel standing on the porch. He wasn't alone. Jessica stood beside him, her arms crossed, her expression cold and distant. Behind them was a police officer. Dad, Daniel said, his voice still flat and emotionless. I see you're ready to go. Daniel, please, can we talk about this? There's nothing to talk about. The house is mine. You need to leave. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. I looked at Jessica, hoping to find some trace of the girl I'd welcomed into our family. The girl who'd called me Dad at her wedding. The girl who'd cried on my shoulder when her own father passed away. Nothing. Her face was blank, almost bored. You're really going to do this? I asked, looking back at Daniel. It's already done. The police officer stepped forward. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. If you refuse, I'll be forced to arrest you for trespassing. Trespassing in my own home. I picked up my bags and walked past my son without another word. I didn't trust myself to speak. If I opened my mouth, I'd either start screaming or break down completely. I loaded my bags into the trunk of my old Honda and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched Daniel and Jessica walk back into the house. My house. They didn't even wait for me to reach the end of the street before they closed the door. I drove aimlessly for an hour, my mind blank with shock. Eventually, I found myself in the parking lot of a cheap motel on the edge of town. The kind of place where the neon sign flickered and the carpet probably hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. I paid for a week in cash and carried my bags to room 117. The room smelled like cigarette smoke and mildew. The bed sagged in the middle. The television was bolted to the dresser. I sat on the edge of the bed and put my head in my hands. How had it come to this? My wife and I had worked our entire lives to build something for our family. We'd saved every penny. We'd invested wisely. We'd made sure Daniel would never have to struggle the way we had. And this was how he repaid us. I thought about my wife, about how she'd adored Daniel, about how proud she'd been at his college graduation, at his wedding, at every milestone in his life. What would she think if she could see this? It would break her heart. I pulled out my wallet and found the bank card my wife had left me. It was an old account, one we'd opened when we first got married. We'd kept it active all these years, adding money here and there, thinking of it as our emergency fund. Tomorrow, I'd go to the bank and get some cash. Figure out my next move. Find a lawyer, maybe. There had to be something I could do. Some way to fight this. I lay back on the lumpy mattress and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept replaying that phone call, the coldness in Daniel's voice, the blank expression on Jessica's face. 2 hours to pack and get out. Like I was nothing. Like 40 years of being his father meant nothing. Outside, I could hear traffic on the highway, sirens in the distance, the low hum of the motel's ancient air conditioning unit. I closed my eyes and tried to push away the images flooding my mind. Daniel as a baby. Daniel learning to ride a bike. Daniel graduating high school. Daniel getting married. All those memories felt like lies now. Had any of it been real? Had my son ever actually loved me? Or had I just been a means to an end? The questions kept coming, relentless and unanswerable. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a fitful sleep, my dreams filled with images of my wife, my son, and the life that had been stolen from me. The next morning, I woke to harsh sunlight streaming through the thin curtains. My body ached from the cheap mattress. My head throbbed with the beginnings of a headache. I showered in the tiny bathroom, the water pressure barely a trickle, and got dressed. I needed to get to the bank. I needed to understand what was happening with my finances. The drive to the bank took 20 minutes. I'd been banking at the same branch for 30 years. The building was familiar, comfortable. I'd known most of the tellers by name before they'd all been replaced by younger faces over the years. I walked in and approached the counter. A young woman with blonde hair and too much makeup smiled at me. "Good morning. How can I help you?" I handed her my card. "I need to check my account balance and withdraw some cash." "Of course. Just give me one moment." She swiped the card and typed something into her computer. Her smile faltered. She typed something else, then looked up at me with confusion in her eyes. "Sir, can you wait here for just a moment? I need to get my manager." "Is there a problem?" "Just, please wait here." She hurried away before I could ask anything else. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. A few minutes later, she returned with an older man in a suit. The manager. I'd met him once or twice before. "Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Could you come with me to my office, please?" What's going on?" "Just come with me, please." I followed him through the bank to a small office at the back. He closed the door and gestured for me to sit down. He walked around to his side of the desk and pulled up something on his computer. "Mr. Harrison, when was the last time you checked this account?" "I don't know. A few months, maybe." "Why?" He turned the monitor so I could see it. My eyes scanned the screen, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. The account balance was $47.23. I blinked. That couldn't be right. The last time I'd checked, there had been over $80,000 in that account. Money my wife and I had saved over decades. "There must be some mistake," I said. "I'm afraid not. Look at the transaction history." He scrolled through the list. Withdrawal after withdrawal, all of them within the last 6 months. $50,000 here, $20,000 there, smaller amounts scattered throughout. "I didn't authorize any of these." "According to our records, you did. Or rather, someone with access to your account did." My hands clenched into fists. "Who?" He clicked on one of the transactions and pulled up more details. My heart sank as I read the name on the screen. Daniel Harrison, joint account holder. "Your son has been the primary user of this account for the last 6 months. He was added as a joint holder 3 years ago. Do you remember signing the paperwork?" I did remember. Daniel had asked me to add him to the account in case something happened to me. "For emergencies," he'd said, "just to make sure I can help if you need anything." I'd signed the papers without a second thought. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. "He took it all," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, but yes, it appears he systematically drained the account. And because he was a joint holder, it was all completely legal." I stared at the screen, at the long list of withdrawals. My entire life savings gone, stolen by my own son. "What about the house?" I asked. "The properties?" The manager's expression grew even more uncomfortable. I can't speak to that. You'd need to check with your lawyer or the county records office, but what? Mr. Harrison, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I've known you for a long time. Your son came in here 6 months ago, right after your wife passed. He had paperwork with him, transfer documents. He said your wife had left everything to him in her will. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. That's not possible. My wife and I had a will. Everything was supposed to be split between both of us, and then to Daniel after we were both gone. I don't know what to tell you. The paperwork looked legitimate. Our legal department reviewed everything. I stood up, my legs shaking. I need copies of everything. Every transaction. Every document he signed. Of course. I'll have someone print it all out for you. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the bank with a thick folder of papers. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold it. I sat in my car and started reading through the documents. It was all there. Every betrayal. Documented in black and white. Daniel had started small, withdrawing a few thousand here and there, testing to see if I'd notice. When I didn't, he'd gotten bolder. Larger withdrawals, more frequent transfers. And then there were the property transfer documents. How was that possible? She'd been in the hospital, barely conscious in those final days. How could she have signed new documents? Unless she hadn't. Had Daniel forged her signature? Had he manipulated her somehow in those final, vulnerable moments? I pulled out my phone and started searching for lawyers. I needed help. I needed someone who could tell me if I had any legal recourse. But as I scrolled through the listings, another thought occurred to me. Lawyers cost money. Money I didn't have anymore. My account had $47,023 down. I had maybe $500 in cash in my wallet. That was it. That was all I had left in the world. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I couldn't afford much of anything. The reality of my situation crashed over me like a wave. I was homeless, penniless. I sat in that parking lot for hours, reading through the documents over and over again, trying to find some loophole, some mistake, something I could use to fight back. There was nothing. Daniel had been meticulous. Every transaction was legal. Every document was in order. He'd planned this perfectly. As the sun began to set, I started the car and drove back to the motel. My week there would be up in 6 days. After that, I didn't know where I'd go. Maybe my car, maybe a shelter. The thought was almost funny. 6 months ago, I'd owned a house worth $400,000. I'd had savings. I'd had a family. Now I had nothing. I parked outside the motel room and sat there in the growing darkness, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. Just making sure you're settled. Don't try to contact us. D. My son. Checking to make sure I'd accepted my fate. Making sure I knew I was alone. I deleted the message and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. A rage was building inside me, hot and fierce, pushing away the numbness that had been protecting me. Daniel thought he'd won. He thought he could just throw me away like garbage and I'd accept it. He thought he could steal everything I'd worked for and face no consequences. He was wrong. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to make him pay. I was going to tear down everything he'd built on the foundation of my life's work. I was going to make him understand what he'd done. I picked up the folder of bank documents and carried it into the motel room. I spread everything out on the bed and started reading through it all again, and this time with a different purpose. I wasn't looking for legal recourse anymore. I was looking for weaknesses, for vulnerabilities, for anything I could use to destroy him, because that's what this had become. Not a legal battle, not a family dispute. This was war, and I was going to win. Before we go any further, hit the hype button, take a second to subscribe, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? I spent the next 3 days in that motel room, barely eating, barely sleeping, going through every document I had. I made lists, I drew diagrams, I tried to piece together a timeline of Daniel's betrayal. The pattern became clear after the first day. That's when the larger withdrawals began. That's when the property transfers went through. Daniel had been waiting, planning, biding his time until my wife was gone and I was vulnerable. The realization made me sick. On the 4th day, I drove to the county records office. I needed to see the property documents for myself. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, helped me pull up the records. My house, the rental property we'd bought as an investment 20 years ago. The small cabin up north that we'd used for vacations, all of it transferred to Daniel's name 6 months ago. These signatures, I said, pointing to my wife's name on the documents. Can you tell me when these were notarized? The clerk checked the dates. March 15th. My wife had died on March 12th. The clerk's expression shifted from bored to concerned. Sir, are you saying these might be fraudulent? You should contact the police. If these documents are forged, that's a serious crime. I thanked her and left with copies of everything, but I didn't go to the police. Not yet. The police would investigate, sure, but investigations took time, months, maybe years. And even if they proved Daniel had forged the documents, what then? He'd go to jail maybe, but I'd still be broke. I'd still be homeless. The legal system would tie everything up in red tape for years. No, I needed a different approach. I drove to the local library and spent hours on one of their public computers researching. I looked up Daniel's business. He ran a consulting firm advising tech startups on growth strategies. According to his company website, he had 15 employees and clients across 3 states. I dug deeper. Found articles about his company in local business journals. Found his social media profiles, carefully curated to show a successful, philanthropic young entrepreneur. There was a photo of him at a charity gala, smiling next to Jessica, both of them looking like the perfect power couple. The caption made me want to put my fist through the monitor. Daniel and Jessica Harrison, raising money for homeless families. The irony was suffocating. I kept digging. Found his business partner, a man named Eric Chen. Found their biggest clients. Found the investors who'd put money into their firm. And then I found something interesting. A lawsuit, filed 2 years ago and settled out of court. A former client claiming Daniel's firm had stolen their proprietary business strategies and sold them to a competitor. The case had been sealed as part of the settlement, but the initial filing was public record. I read through it carefully. The client hadn't had enough evidence to win in court, but the accusations were damning. If they were true, Daniel's entire business was built on stealing other people's ideas and reselling them. I saved everything to a flash drive, printed out the most important documents, started building a file. By the end of the week, I had a clearer picture of my son's life. His business was successful, but it was also built on a foundation that was shakier than it appeared. His clients trusted him, but that trust was based on a carefully maintained reputation. His investors believed in him, but their belief was based on numbers and projections that might not hold up under scrutiny. Everything in Daniel's life depended on maintaining the illusion of success and integrity. I was going to shatter that illusion, but I needed help. I needed someone who understood the business world better than I did, someone who could help me navigate the complex web of finances and relationships that Daniel had built. I thought about the few friends I had left. Most of them were from my working days, and I'd lost touch with most of them after I'd retired. But there was one person who might be willing to help. Tom Martinez had been my coworker for 15 years before he'd started his own accounting firm. We'd stayed in touch, meeting for lunch every few months to catch up. He was a good man, honest, principled, and he owed me a favor from years back when I'd helped him land a major client. I called him from the motel room. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Tom, it's James Harrison." "James, good to hear from you. How have you been?" "Not great, Tom. I need your help with something." I told him everything. The phone call from Daniel, the bank account, the forged documents, my suspicions about Daniel's business practices. Tom was silent for a long moment after I finished. "Jesus, James, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say. I need help taking him down." Another pause. "James, you should go to the police. If he forged those documents, the police will take too long. I need to hit him now, while he thinks he's safe." "What are you asking me to do?" "I need you to look at his business, find the weak spots, help me figure out how to destroy what he's built." "James, I'm an accountant, not a private investigator." "I know. But you understand how businesses work. You know how to read financial statements. You know where people hide their dirt." Tom sighed. "This could get messy. If we start digging into his business and he finds out..." "He threw me out on the street, Tom. He stole everything my wife and I worked for. I don't care about messy." "All right. Send me everything you have. I'll take a look. I need to pay you. I don't have much right now." "Don't worry about it. Consider this a favor. Besides, your son sounds like a piece of work. If he's running a dirty business, someone should shine a light on it." I spent the next hour scanning documents and emailing them to Tom. When I was done, I felt a small flicker of hope for the first time in days. I wasn't alone in this. I had an ally. The next morning, my phone rang. Tom. "James, I've been going through the documents you sent. There's some interesting stuff here." "What did you find?" "Well, for starters, his business is leveraged to the hilt. He's got loans, lines of credit, investors expecting returns. He's making money, but he's also spending it as fast as it comes in. His margins are razor thin." "Meaning what?" "Meaning if he loses a few key clients, or if his investors get spooked and pull out, The whole thing could collapse like a house of cards. How do we make that happen? That's the tricky part. We'd need to give his clients or investors a reason to lose faith in him, some kind of scandal or revelation that makes them question his integrity. I thought about the old lawsuit. What about that case from 2 years ago? The one about stolen business strategies? I saw that. The case was sealed, but the initial accusations are damaging. If we could get more information about what actually happened, how? The client who filed the suit. If we could talk to them, find out what they know, we might be able to build a case that Daniel's entire business model is unethical. You think they'd be willing to talk? Maybe, especially if they're still bitter about being screwed over. People love a chance for revenge. I smiled grimly. Yeah, they do. Let me do some digging, see if I can track down the client. In the meantime, you should think about what you want the endgame to be here. Are you trying to get your money back? Are you trying to send him to jail? Are you just trying to ruin him? I thought about that for a moment. What did I want? I wanted him to feel what I'd felt. The shock, the betrayal, the helplessness of watching everything you'd built disappear. I want him destroyed, I said. Completely. All right then, let's get to work. Over the next 2 weeks, Tom and I became a team. He worked his network, calling in favors, digging up information. I spent my days in libraries and coffee shops, using free Wi-Fi to research every aspect of Daniel's life. We found the client from the old lawsuit. His name was Peter Jameson, and he owned a small tech startup that had gone under shortly after Daniel's firm had consulted for them. Tom reached out to him, and after some initial hesitation, Peter agreed to meet. I drove 3 hours to meet Peter at a coffee shop in his city. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the tired eyes of someone who'd been kicked while he was down. "Mr. Harrison," he said, shaking my hand, "Tom told me a little about your situation. I'm sorry." "Thank you. I appreciate you meeting with me." We sat down, and I explained what Daniel had done to me. Peter listened, his expression growing darker with each detail. "That sounds like Daniel," he said when I finished. "The man has no conscience. Tom said you had a lawsuit against him." Peter nodded. 2 years ago, my company hired Daniel's firm to help us scale our operations. We gave them access to everything, our business model, our client list, our growth strategies. 3 months later, we found out that Daniel had taken everything we'd shared and sold it to one of our competitors. "How did you find out?" "One of their employees reached out to me. Felt guilty, I guess. Sent me screenshots of internal emails showing Daniel pitching our exact strategies to the other company." "What happened with the lawsuit?" "Daniel's lawyers buried us. We were a small startup. We didn't have the resources for a prolonged legal battle. We settled out of court for a fraction of what we were asking for, and part of the settlement was that we couldn't talk about what happened." "But you're talking to me now." Peter smiled grimly. "The NDA was specifically about public statements and media contacts. It didn't say anything about private conversations. Besides, I've been waiting for someone to take that bastard down. If you're serious about going after him, I'll help however I can. I need documentation, anything that proves what he did to you." I kept copies of everything, emails, documents, recordings of phone calls, all of it. Even though it was part of a sealed case? Especially because it was sealed. I knew someday this might be useful. He pulled out a flash drive and handed it to me. "This is everything. Use it well." I took the drive like it was made of gold. "Thank you, Peter. This means everything." "Just promise me you'll make him pay." "I will." I drove back to my motel with the flash drive, my hands shaking with anticipation. This was it. This was the ammunition I needed. That night, Tom and I went through everything on the drive. It was damning. Email chains showing Daniel negotiating with Peter's competitor. Documents proving he'd shared confidential information. Even a recorded phone call where Daniel laughed about how easy it had been to steal Peter's business model. "This is gold," Tom said. "If this gets out, his reputation is finished." "How do we get it out?" "We need to be strategic. If we just dump this online, Daniel's lawyers will bury it in lawsuits and take down notices. We need to get it to someone with credibility, someone who can't be easily silenced." I thought about that. A journalist? Maybe. Or better yet, we go straight to his clients and investors, show them who they're really doing business with. Won't that put us at risk? If Daniel figures out it's us? Tom shrugged. "That's a risk we'll have to take. But honestly, what's he going to do? Sue you? You don't have anything for him to take. That's actually your advantage here. You're judgment-proof." He was right. Daniel had already taken everything. I had nothing left to lose. "All right," I said. "Let's do it." We spent the next week putting together packages for Daniel's top 5 clients and his 3 biggest investors. Each package contained copies of the emails, documents, and recordings from Peter's case, along with a cover letter explaining who Daniel really was. We didn't sign the letters. We didn't include return addresses. We wanted the information to speak for itself. On a Tuesday morning, we drove to a post office 2 towns over and mailed all the packages. Then we waited. The response came faster than I expected. 3 days later, Tom called me. "It's working," he said. "I just heard from a friend at one of Daniel's client companies. They received the package. They're scheduling an emergency meeting with Daniel to discuss the allegations." "All of them?" "So far, 3 of the 5 clients and 2 of the investors have confirmed receiving the packages. The others probably did too, but haven't said anything yet." My heart was pounding. What happens now? Now we watch it burn. The next few days were a blur. Tom kept me updated as information trickled in through his network. One of Daniel's biggest clients terminated their contract. Then another. One of his investors demanded a full audit of the company's practices. Daniel was scrambling. According to Tom's sources, he was calling emergency meetings, sending frantic emails, trying to do damage control. But it was too late. The reputation he'd spent years building was crumbling. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it carefully. "Hello." "You did this." Daniel's voice, no longer cold and detached. Now it was raw with fury. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said calmly. "Don't play dumb. Someone sent confidential information to my clients. Information that only a handful of people had access to. You're behind this." "Am I?" "I don't know how you got that information, and I don't care, but you need to stop. Now, before this gets worse." "Worse for who? You?" "I'm warning you, old man. If you keep this up, I'll make your life hell." I laughed, actually laughed. "My life is already hell, Daniel. You saw to that. You threw me out. You stole my money. You forged your mother's signature. So forgive me if your threats don't scare me." "You can't prove any of that." "Maybe not. But I can prove what you did to Peter Jameson. I can prove you've built your business on stealing from your clients. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "What do you want?" "I want you to lose everything, just like I did." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear or shock. It was from adrenaline, from the satisfaction of finally fighting back. Tom called me an hour later. "Another client just pulled out, and one of the investors is threatening legal action." "Good. James, there's something else. I've been digging into Jessica's background, Daniel's wife." "What about her?" "She's got a record. Nothing major, but she was arrested for fraud about 10 years ago, scamming elderly people out of their savings through fake investment schemes." "Daniel's married to a con artist?" "Looks like it. The charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, but the arrest is still on record. I'm thinking Jessica might have been the brains behind this whole operation. Maybe she saw your family's money and convinced Daniel to help her get it." It made a sick kind of sense. Jessica had always been the more assertive one in the relationship, the one pushing Daniel to be more ambitious, to make more money. "Can we use this?" I asked. "Maybe. If we can prove she was involved in forging your wife's signature or manipulating the property transfers, we might be able to bring criminal charges. Do it. Find whatever you can." "I'm on it." I hung up and sat in the quiet motel room, processing this new information. My son hadn't just betrayed me on his own. He'd been manipulated by a woman with a history of scamming people. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy for Daniel, to believe he'd been led astray by a bad influence. But I couldn't. Daniel was an adult. He'd made his choices, and he'd have to live with the consequences. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Jessica." I stared at the message for a long time. This was interesting. Jessica wanted to meet. Without Daniel. Maybe she was starting to panic. Maybe she realized the walls were closing in. Or maybe it was a trap. Either way, I was going to find out. The house went on the market 2 weeks before Christmas. I drove by it one afternoon, unable to resist the urge to see it one more time before it was sold to strangers. A for sale sign stood in the front yard. The lawn needed mowing, the shutters needed painting. It looked smaller than I remembered, more ordinary. Just another suburban house on another suburban street. It was hard to believe I'd lived there for 40 years. Hard to believe I'd raised a family inside those walls, celebrated birthdays and holidays, watched my son grow from a baby into a man. All those memories felt distant now, like they'd happened to someone else. I was about to drive away when the front door opened. Jessica came out, carrying a box. She loaded it into a moving truck parked in the driveway, then went back inside. I should have left. There was no reason to stay. But something kept me there, watching. Jessica made several more trips, each time carrying boxes or bags. She looked tired, defeated. Her hair was messy, her clothes rumpled. The polished, put-together woman I'd known was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she'd been through hell. Good. Daniel appeared in the doorway, carrying a small suitcase. He looked even worse than Jessica. He'd lost weight. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow. He moved slowly, like every step took effort. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness watching him. This was my son, the boy I'd raised, now broken and destroyed. I'd done this to him. I'd taken everything he had. He deserved it. I kept reminding myself of that. He deserved all of this. But knowing he deserved it didn't make it easier to watch. Daniel and Jessica stood by the moving truck, talking. I was too far away to hear what they were saying, but their body language told me enough. They were arguing. Jessica gestured angrily. Daniel just stood there, his shoulders slumped, taking whatever she was throwing at him. Finally, Jessica threw up her hands and climbed into the passenger seat of the truck. Daniel got behind the wheel. They pulled away, leaving the house, my house, empty. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty driveway, the dark windows, the for sale sign swaying slightly in the winter breeze. This was my victory. This was what I'd fought for. So why did it feel so hollow? My phone rang. Tom. James, where are you? Driving around. Why? I need you to come to my office. There's something you need to see. What is it? Just come. It's important. I drove to Tom's office, a small suite in a professional building downtown. He met me in the lobby and led me upstairs to his office. What's this about? I asked. I've been going through more of Daniel's financial records, the ones we got through discovery for the lawsuit, and I found something interesting. He opened his laptop and turned it so I could see the screen. It showed a bank statement from an account I didn't recognize. What am I looking at? This is an account Daniel opened 6 years ago. It's been dormant for the last year, but before that, there were regular deposits. Small amounts, usually a few $100s at a time. So I traced where those deposits were coming from. James, they were coming from your wife. I leaned closer to the screen. What? Your wife was giving Daniel money, regularly, for years. That doesn't make sense. Why would she do that? I don't know, but look at this. He opened another file. These are emails between Daniel and your wife. I found them on an old backup drive that was included in the discovery materials. He scrolled through the emails. They were short, mostly logistical. Thanks for the help, Mom. I really appreciate it. Of course, sweetheart. Just don't tell your father. He wouldn't understand. I won't. Love you. My hands started shaking. She was giving him money behind my back? Looks like it, and not just small amounts. Over the 6 years, she gave him close to $70,000. Why? Tom scrolled to another email. This one might explain it. I used part of the $50,000 to rent a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, a studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom that had seen better days, but it was mine. No more motel rooms. No more living out of a suitcase. Moving in was depressing. I didn't have furniture, just an air mattress and a folding chair. My possessions fit in 3 boxes. 40 years of life, reduced to almost nothing. I spent Christmas alone, eating Chinese takeout and watching old movies on my laptop. I thought about calling Daniel, but I didn't know what I'd say. The anger had faded, replaced by a dull ache that wouldn't go away. Tom invited me to his family's Christmas dinner, but I declined. I wasn't ready to be around happy families, to pretend everything was okay. On New Year's Eve, I sat in my empty apartment and made a list of resolutions: get a job, buy furniture, figure out what to do with the rest of my life. The next morning, I started looking for work. It was harder than I'd expected. I was in my 60s, with no recent work experience. Most places didn't even bother to respond to my applications. Eventually, I found a job at a hardware store, stocking shelves and helping customers. The pay was minimum wage, barely enough to cover my rent and food, but it was something. It gave me a reason to get up in the morning. Tom and I stayed in touch. He'd stopped digging into Daniel's life once the lawsuit settled, but he checked in on me regularly, making sure I was okay. You should see someone, he said one day over lunch. A therapist. What you've been through, losing your wife, the betrayal, the revenge, that's a lot to process on your own. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're existing. There's a difference. He was right, but I didn't want to admit it. I told myself I'd be fine once I got settled, once I adjusted to my new life. But weeks turned into months, and the emptiness didn't fade. I worked, I came home, I slept, repeat. I avoided thinking about Daniel, avoided wondering where he was or how he was doing. But late at night, lying on my air mattress, I couldn't help but remember the sound of his voice on that last phone call, the brokenness in it. I'd done that to him. I'd broken my own son. In late January, Tom called with news. The house sold. It went for $420,000. After paying off the settlement and the mortgage, there's about $70,000 left over. What happens to it? Legally, it should be split between Daniel and you as your wife's heirs. But given the circumstances, you might be able to claim all of it. Daniel would have to fight you for it, and I don't think he has the resources. $70,000. Combined with what I had left from the $50,000, it would be enough to get me back on my feet. Maybe buy a small place of my own? Start over properly. What do I need to do? I'll file the paperwork. It might take a few weeks, but unless Daniel contests it, the money should be yours. And if he does contest it, then we go to court. But honestly, I don't think he will. He doesn't have the money for lawyers, and from what I've heard, he's moved out of state, trying to start over somewhere new. The thought of Daniel starting over somewhere, far from here, far from me, brought a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that I wouldn't have to see him, sadness that it had come to this, and underneath it all, a persistent question. Had I done the right thing? The money came through in March. $70,000 deposited into my account. Tom had been right. Daniel didn't contest it. He'd let it go without a fight. I used some of the money to buy real furniture, a bed, a couch, a small dining table. I bought a decent television and a coffee maker. Little by little, I made the apartment feel more like a home. I even bought a few pictures for the walls. Nothing fancy, just prints from a home goods store. But they made the place feel less empty. One Saturday afternoon, I was hanging a picture when someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Tom usually called before visiting. I opened the door to find Jessica standing in the hallway. She looked different, thinner, older. Her hair was shorter, dyed a darker color. She wore jeans and a plain t-shirt, no makeup. She looked nervous. "James," she said, "I hope you don't mind me coming by. I got your address from Tom." "What do you want?" "Just to talk. 5 minutes. Please?" Against my better judgment, I let her in. She looked around the small apartment, taking in the sparse furnishings, the still empty walls. "Tom told me you got the money from the house sale," she said. "That's none of your business." "I know, I wanted to make sure you were okay." "Why do you care?" She sat down on the couch without being invited. "Because I feel guilty about what happened, about what we did to you. A little late for guilt. I know, but I needed to tell you anyway. What Daniel and I did, what I pushed him to do, it was wrong. I convinced him that taking control of your assets was the smart move, that you weren't capable of managing your own life. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." I stood by the door, arms crossed. "What do you want, Jessica? Forgiveness?" "No, I don't expect that. I just wanted you to know that Daniel didn't do this on his own. I was the one who pushed him. I was the one who convinced him that this was okay. And I've been living with that guilt every day since." "Where's Daniel now?" "I don't know. We divorced 3 months ago. He moved to Arizona, I think. We haven't spoken since." "And you?" "I'm living with my sister in Nevada, trying to figure out what comes next. I got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. It's not much, but it's honest work." "Good for you," she stood up. "I know you hate me. You have every right to. But I needed to see you, to tell you I'm sorry. Not because I expect it to change anything, but because it's the truth." She walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Daniel loved you. He still does. What we did, it destroyed him. He made his choices. So did you." She left before I could respond. I stood in my empty apartment, processing what she'd said. Daniel still loved me. He was suffering. Good. That's what I'd wanted. Except it didn't feel good. It just felt sad. I went back to hanging pictures, trying to distract myself. But Jessica's words kept echoing in my head. Over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking more and more about Daniel. Not about the betrayal or the anger, but about the good memories. Teaching him to ride a bike, playing catch in the backyard, his high school graduation when he'd hugged me and said, "Thanks for everything, Dad." Had all of that been real? Or had it been a performance, a manipulation? I wanted to believe it had been real, that somewhere beneath the greed and the betrayal, there was still the boy I'd raised, the boy who'd loved me once. But I didn't know how to reconcile that boy with the man who'd thrown me out of my own house. Tom came by one evening with pizza and beer. We ate and watched a basketball game, not talking about anything important. During a commercial break, Tom muted the television. "You ever think about reaching out to Daniel?" he asked. "Why would I do that?" "Because he's your son, and because holding on to this anger is eating you alive." "I'm not angry anymore." "Then what are you?" "I don't know. Empty." Tom nodded. "That's why you should reach out. Not to forgive him, not to make things right. Just to close the chapter, get some kind of closure." "What would I even say?" "Whatever you need to say, or nothing. Just hearing your voice might be enough." I thought about this. "You think he'd even want to hear from me?" "I think he's probably hoping you'll call every single day." After Tom left, I sat with my phone in my hand, staring at Daniel's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. I could do this. I could call him, say, something. Figure out if there was any path forward, or I could put the phone down and move on with my life. In the end, I put the phone down. I wasn't ready, maybe I'd never be ready. But the seed had been planted, the thought that maybe someday I could reach out. Not to forgive, not to forget, but just to acknowledge that Daniel was still my son, even if I didn't know what that meant anymore. Spring came, and with it a restlessness I couldn't shake. I'd been working at the hardware store for months, and the routine was starting to wear on me. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep. Repeat. This wasn't living. It was just existing. Tom had been right about needing to see someone. In early April, I finally made an appointment with a therapist. Her name was Dr. Rachel Morrison, and her office was in a small building near the community college. Our first session was awkward. I didn't know what to say, how to start. She helped by asking simple questions. "Tell me why you're here." "I'm trying to figure out how to move forward with my life." "What's stopping you?" "I don't know. Guilt, maybe, or regret." "About what?" I told her everything. By the time I finished, an hour had passed. Dr. Morrison sat back in her chair, considering. "That's a lot to carry," she said finally. "I'm managing." "Are you?" "Because from what you've described, you're isolated, working a job you don't enjoy, and spending most of your time alone. That's not managing, that's surviving." "What's the difference?" "Managing means you're actively working to improve your situation. Surviving means you're just treading water, trying not to drown." She was right. I was treading water. I had been for months. "What do I do about it?" "That's for you to figure out. But I'd suggest starting with forgiveness." "I'm not ready to forgive Daniel." "I'm not talking about Daniel. I'm talking about forgiving yourself." "Myself? For what?" "For being human? For feeling betrayed? For wanting revenge? For being imperfect?" I didn't know how to respond to that. We ended the session with an agreement to meet again the following week. I left feeling unsettled, like she'd opened a door I'd been keeping deliberately closed. Over the next few months, I saw Dr. Morrison every week. Slowly, painfully, I started to unpack everything that had happened. The betrayal, the anger, the revenge, the discovery about my wife. "Your wife loved you," Dr. Morrison said during one session, "but she also believed in your son. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive." She lied to me. She kept a secret. There's a difference. She was trying to support Daniel without hurting you. That doesn't excuse it, but it does explain it. It doesn't make it easier. Nothing about this is easy, but holding on to the anger and hurt isn't helping you. It's just keeping you stuck. She was right. I was stuck, caught between the life I'd had and the life I was trying to build. In June, Tom called with unexpected news. "Daniel's back in town." My heart skipped. "Why?" "He's got a job interview. A startup company is willing to take a chance on him despite everything that happened. They liked his experience, and they're willing to overlook his past if he proves himself." "Good for him." "James, he wants to see you." "No." "Just hear me out. He's changed. I've talked to him a few times. He's in therapy, working on himself. He knows what he did was wrong, and he's trying to make amends." "Making amends doesn't undo what he did." "No, it doesn't. But maybe it's a start." I told Tom I'd think about it, but I had no intention of seeing Daniel. What would be the point? We'd said everything there was to say. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Daniel was here, in town, trying to rebuild his life, just like I was. Dr. Morrison's words came back to me. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about releasing yourself from the burden of carrying their mistakes. Maybe seeing Daniel wasn't about him. Maybe it was about me. I called Tom the next morning. Tell Daniel I'll meet him. One time. That's it. I think that's a good idea, James. I really do. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. I arrived early and ordered a coffee, my hands shaking slightly as I waited. Daniel walked in exactly on time. He looked different. He'd lost even more weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But there was something else, too. A kind of humility I'd never seen in him before. He sat down across from me, hands folded on the table. Dad, thank you for coming. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I don't know where to start, he said. I've thought about this meeting 1,000 times, rehearsed what I'd say, but now that you're here, I can't remember any of it. Why did you want to see me? Because I need to apologize. Really apologize, not just say the words. What I did to you was unforgivable. I know that. But I need you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm spending every day trying to become a better person. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. I haven't given you any reason to trust me. All I can do is show you over time that I've changed, if you'll give me that chance. I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to think. Tell me about Arizona, I said finally. It was hard. I didn't know anyone, didn't have any connections. I worked as a bartender for a while, then got a job doing data entry at an insurance company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and it gave me time to think about what I'd done, about who I'd become. What made you come back? The job opportunity partly, but also I wanted to make things right with you. I know I can't give you back the years we lost, can't undo the hurt I caused, but I wanted to try. Jessica came to see me, I said. A few months ago. She told me she pushed you into all of this. She did, but that doesn't excuse what I did. I made the choices. I threw you out. I took your money. Jessica might have influenced me, but ultimately I'm responsible. I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but all I saw was a broken man trying to put himself back together. I destroyed your life, I said quietly. I destroyed yours first. Does that make it right? What I did to you? Daniel thought about this. I don't know. Maybe we both did terrible things. Maybe we're both trying to figure out how to live with that. We sat in silence for a moment. I'm seeing a therapist, I said finally. She told me I need to work on forgiveness, and I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm trying to let go of the anger. That's more than I deserve. Maybe. I don't know anymore. But seeing you here, seeing that you're trying to change, it helps. A little. Dad, I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance we could try again? Not go back to how things were, but build something new? I don't expect you to trust me or welcome me back with open arms. But maybe we could talk sometimes. Coffee every few months, just to stay connected. I wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him that too much had happened, that there was no going back. But looking at him, really looking at him, I saw something I hadn't expected to see. Hope. Not hope that I'd forgive him or that we'd be a happy family again. Just hope that we could find some kind of peace, some kind of resolution. Maybe, I said. I'm not making any promises, but maybe we could try. The relief on his face was palpable. Thank you. That's all I can ask for. We finished our coffee and parted ways. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, exactly, but not emptiness either. Maybe it was possibility. Over the next few months, Daniel and I met for coffee every few weeks. The conversations were stilted at first, both of us uncertain how to navigate this new relationship. We talked about safe topics, his new job, my work at the hardware store, the weather. Slowly, carefully, we started to rebuild something. Not trust, not yet, but a tentative connection. In August, Daniel got the job with the startup. He called me to share the news, his voice filled with excitement I hadn't heard in years. It's a good opportunity, Dad. They're willing to take a chance on me. I'm not going to mess this up. I'm glad for you. Would you want to come to dinner sometime? To celebrate? I hesitated. Dinner felt like a bigger step than coffee. I'll think about it. Okay. No pressure. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Dr. Morrison and I talked about it in our next session. Are you avoiding dinner because you're not ready or because you're afraid? She asked. Maybe both. What are you afraid of? Getting hurt again, letting him back in and having him betray me again. That's a valid fear, but you can't protect yourself from pain by avoiding connection. And that's not living, James. That's hiding. She was right. I'd been hiding for months, maybe years. hiding from my grief over losing my wife, hiding from my anger at Daniel, hiding from the reality that I was lonely. I called Daniel that evening. "I'll come to dinner. This Saturday, if that works." "Really?" "Yeah, that works. That's great, Dad. I'll cook. Nothing fancy, just pasta or something." Saturday came, and I drove to Daniel's new apartment. It was small, similar to mine, but he'd made it comfortable. Plants on the windowsill, books on the shelves, a sense that someone actually lived there. He'd made spaghetti and garlic bread. We ate at his small dining table, the conversation still slightly awkward, but easier than before. After dinner, we sat on his couch with beers, watching a baseball game. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately," Daniel said during a commercial break. "Yeah?" "About what she would think of all this, of what I did, what you did, where we ended up." "I don't know what she'd think. I think she'd be disappointed in both of us, for letting things get so bad, for hurting each other." He was probably right. My wife had always been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and kept everyone connected. "She loved you very much," I said. "Even at the end, even when she was making decisions I didn't understand, she loved you." "I know, and I betrayed that love. I betrayed both of you. You made mistakes. We all did." We watched the game in silence for a while. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think you'll ever really forgive me?" I thought about this carefully. "I don't know. Part of me has already forgiven you, but another part of me is still angry, still hurt. Maybe that will fade over time. Maybe it won't. All I know is that I'm trying." "That's fair. That's more than fair." We finished our beers and said goodnight. As I drove home, I realized something had shifted. The anger that had consumed me for so long was starting to fade, replaced by something more complicated. Not love, exactly, but not hate either. Maybe it was acceptance. Acceptance that what happened had happened and no amount of anger or revenge could change it. Fall arrived, bringing cooler weather and the start of a new season. I'd been at the hardware store for almost a year, and I was starting to feel restless again. The work was fine, but it wasn't fulfilling. Tom suggested I think about going back to school. "Take some classes at the community college. Learn something new. You've got the money now. Use it to invest in yourself." I enrolled in a business management course, mostly out of curiosity. To my surprise, I enjoyed it. The professor was engaging, the material interesting. For the first time in years, I felt intellectually stimulated. I took another class the following semester, then another. Before I knew it, I was working toward an associate's degree. Daniel and I continued our regular coffee meetings. Sometimes we had dinner at his place or mine. Once we went to a baseball game together. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before. It was something different. More honest, perhaps. More aware of each other's flaws and limitations. One evening in October, Daniel called me sounding upset. "Dad, can I come over? I need to talk to someone." "Of course. Come now if you want." He arrived 20 minutes later, looking distressed. I made tea and we sat in my small living room. "What's wrong?" "I got a call from Jessica today. She's in trouble, legal trouble. She tried to run the same scam she did years ago, and this time they caught her. She's asking me to help her, to testify on her behalf or something." "What did you tell her?" "That I couldn't help her, that I'd already paid for my mistakes, and I wasn't going to get dragged into hers. But Dad, I feel guilty, like I should do something." "You're not responsible for Jessica's choices." "I know, but I can't help feeling like I pushed her into this. Like if I'd been a better husband, if I hadn't lost everything, she wouldn't have gotten desperate. Jessica made her own choices long before she met you. The fraud arrest from 10 years ago proves that. You're not responsible for who she is." He nodded but didn't look convinced. "Daniel, listen to me. You've spent the last year trying to rebuild your life, trying to become a better person. Don't let Jessica pull you back into that world. You don't owe her anything." "You're right. I know you're right. I just needed to hear someone else say it." We talked for another hour, and by the time he left, he seemed calmer, more resolved. After he was gone, I sat in my apartment thinking about how far we'd both come. Daniel had gone from a successful businessman to losing everything, and now he was slowly rebuilding. I'd gone from comfortable retirement to homelessness, and now I was building a new life from scratch. We'd both been broken, and we were both trying to heal. In November, I received an unexpected phone call. A lawyer representing Peter Jameson, the man who'd provided the evidence against Daniel. "Mr. Harrison, I'm calling because Mr. Jameson wanted to reach out to you. He's been following your situation, and he wanted to offer his gratitude for your help in exposing Daniel's fraudulent practices." I was just trying to get revenge. I didn't think about helping anyone else. Nevertheless, your actions led to justice. Mr. Jameson's company has recovered financially, and he attributes some of that success to the vindication he received when Daniel's practices were exposed. He'd like to meet with you, if you're willing. I met Peter for lunch the following week. He looked better than when I'd seen him last, healthier and more confident. James, I wanted to thank you personally. What you did, taking down Daniel, it helped me move forward. I'd been carrying around so much anger and resentment about what happened to my company. Seeing him face consequences gave me closure. I'm glad something good came out of it. More than you know. After Daniel's scandal broke, several of his other former clients reached out to me. We've been working together, supporting each other. Some of us are even exploring a class action lawsuit to recover damages. Against Daniel. Against his former business partner, too. It turns out Daniel wasn't the only one engaging in unethical practices. The whole firm was corrupt. I felt a strange mix of emotions hearing this. On one hand, I was glad other victims were getting justice. On the other hand, I couldn't help thinking about Daniel, about how much he'd already lost. How are you doing? Peter asked, seeming to sense my thoughts. I heard you lost everything, too. I'm rebuilding. It's slow, but I'm getting there. If you ever need anything, a job reference, some consulting work, whatever, let me know. I owe you. We exchanged contact information, and I left feeling slightly better about everything that had happened. Maybe my revenge had served a larger purpose. Maybe it had helped more people than just me. Christmas approached, and Daniel asked if I wanted to spend it together. I know it won't be like the old days, he said, but I thought maybe we could order Chinese food and watch movies. Keep it simple. I'd like that. Christmas Day, we sat in his apartment eating lo mein and watching It's a Wonderful Life. It was quiet and simple, nothing like the elaborate celebrations we'd had when my wife was alive. But it was nice, comfortable. During one of the commercials, Daniel spoke. I've been thinking a lot about what you said last year, about how I destroyed your life and you destroyed mine, and maybe we're both trying to figure out how to live with that. Yeah? I think maybe that's exactly what we're doing. We're both carrying guilt and regret, and we're both trying to move forward despite it. Maybe that's the best we can do. Maybe it is. I'm glad we're trying, Dad. I'm glad you gave me this chance. Me too. As the movie played, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite happiness, but something close to it. Peace, maybe, or hope. Whatever it was, it felt good.